Hi, I'm Luke Chow from the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis in Toronto, Canada, where we make hypnosis make sense. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the most common errors or mistakes that new practitioners make with their clients. If you've had a bad experience with hypnosis, listen for these points because it's quite possible or even probable that your practitioner made one of these mistakes. The first mistake that new practitioners make is not doing an adequate pre-talk. And in the hypnosis business, a pre-talk refers to a short conversation, or sometimes it's a monologue or a speech given to the client so they know what to expect, so that any misconceptions are cleared, and so any worries or doubts about hypnosis are alleviated. And that pre-talk is intended to get you, the client, on the same page as the practitioner. And every practitioner practices somewhat differently, which means that the pre-talk really should be tailored for the specific practitioner. In my office, there are certain things I say over and over again so many times to every new client that that pre-talk is on video. Without an adequate pre-talk, what often happens is that the client during their first session, if they expect to be asleep, if they expect to be under the hypnotist's control, if they expect to have no free will, and the experience is going to be what hypnosis actually is, there's going to be a mismatch between what the client expects and what is actually delivered. And that mismatch can cause the client to be distracted by the idea that they're not getting what they're paying for, and they're not getting what they expect. And the way to alleviate that is not for a hypnotist to learn how to do magic, which is not really what we do and not really possible. The solution is to get the client to better understand what the hypnotist is actually going to be doing. So that's the pre-talk. The second mistake that new practitioners often make, and I'll see this with experienced practitioners as well, is not doing an assessment or an adequate assessment of whether the client is a suitable candidate for hypnosis. Now, I know that a lot of practitioners say that everyone can be hypnotized. Usually they'll also say that below a certain level of intelligence or a certain level of language comprehension that those people can't be hypnotized, but that means not everyone can be hypnotized. And also, even if everyone can be hypnotized, I would add that not everyone can be hypnotized easily, and not everyone would benefit from hypnosis more than a more traditional or mainstream approach like cognitive behavioral therapy. There are some people for whom hypnosis is a very obvious choice, and there are other people for whom hypnosis would be a much less obvious choice. In my office, we do a suggestibility exercise to see how responsive the client is to a simple set of verbal suggestions, and that is predictive of how well the sessions would go for them. We also do an intake so that we can assess the client's history, their motivations, and their goals, so that we can then assess whether or not we think we can help the client. And we don't charge for any of this. The initial consultation that we give to clients is at no cost. So we at our office will only take a client if they are suggestible enough that I can predict that I can help them, and if the details of their case are such that I can outline a plan for them and have a reasonable route to being able to help them with their problems. So as long as those two criteria are checked off, then I'll take the client. But I won't just see someone off the bat. I won't say that I can help someone unless I can also say how I can help them. If someone comes to my office for a free consultation and for whatever reason we don't recommend proceeding with hypnosis right away, usually we will offer alternative next steps. And very often those alternative next steps will have the client looping back to us once they're better prepared for hypnosis. So for someone who's not very suggestible, for example, we'll recommend they do a few of our free sessions on YouTube to better respond to my voice. And then when they come for an actual paid session, it's because they're already responding to my free sessions online. Another example is that if the client comes to us, they want to quit smoking, but they have major depressive disorder, and they don't really see the point in living longer, then we'll refer the client out to have their depression treated. And once that's handled and they can be able to hope for a better future, then they're in a better place to be deciding that they'll quit smoking. So we rarely just straight up reject people. We'll usually have a rationale, and that assessment increases our success rate. A third mistake that many new practitioners make is using scripts, or worse, playing actual recordings when clients come in for sessions. And the whole business model of selling hypnosis sessions and giving people recordings in office, I'm not even going to touch. It does exist. It does happen. It's not what I do. It's not what I recommend. And in my opinion, it's a complete ripoff. So that's all I'll say about that. But the practice of reading from scripts is much more common. And one of my other videos on my YouTube channel explains why I do not use scripts, why I don't teach students to use scripts, and why I think the use of scripts during live paid hypnosis sessions is extremely poor hypnosis. I do understand that new practitioners often see their scripts as a kind of a crutch or a safety blanket. But in my opinion, once the practitioner is confident enough to be charging for sessions, they should also be confident enough to be able to deliver an actual custom, live, tailored experience based on the client's needs and goals and wants. Another mistake that new practitioners often make is confusing the client feeling good or being deeply relaxed during a session with long-term results. Sometimes there's a disconnect between the experience in the office and how good it feels versus the client's experience after the session is over and how good they feel in a week or a month. As much as possible, I endeavor to give messages that are going to benefit clients long term. I understand that the hypnotist can only work with the feedback that they have. And when they see the client is relaxing and responding when they are in the office, then of course the hypnotist wants to keep doing more of the kinds of things that cause them to be relaxed and comfortable. Unfortunately, for people to change long term, they sometimes, very often, have to accept uncomfortable truths. And I'll give you one example. Many of the things your parents told you were appropriate when you were a child, but are not appropriate now that you are an adult. Now, it is possible to say that in a way that's softer and more gentle, but essentially I'm saying that many of your deeply held beliefs that you've had since you were very young are no longer appropriate for you today. And when you first hear that, or when you first contemplate or accept that, it can be somewhat uncomfortable. So a practitioner who's not willing to say uncomfortable things is doing you a disservice by keeping you relaxed and positive and happy when you're in the office. Again, I see my job as creating long-term results. While relaxation in the session is characteristic of hypnosis, it's not the main point. And a new practitioner often believes that just relaxing the client is enough, or that relaxation is the main point. But a few of my clients come to me just to relax for an hour, maybe be a little bit more comfortable or calm the rest of the day, and then be happy with that. My clients come to me for long-term results. Another fundamental mistake that new practitioners often make is giving too much credit to hypnosis as a state of mind, or the unconscious mind, as something that is almost godlike in its ability to know all the answers or cause the change that you want to see. In the hypnotherapy world, there often, in my opinion, this is all just my opinion, there's often an overvaluation of unconscious processes and an undervaluation of conscious decision-making or conscious choice. So early in my career, I often practiced the way that every other practitioner does, because I can only be influenced by the people I learned from. And I'll pick smoking cessation as an example. With smoking cessation, I was encouraged to work with the feelings, with the triggers, with all of the messy, unconscious drives and impulses. Whereas today, I focus much more on getting the client to a decision point where they are intentionally making a decision with their rational, conscious mind, with their conscience, with their values being held in their heart, with a look at present and past and future. They're making a decision and then sticking with it. Hypnosis, as a state of mind, is simply a way to get the client to suspend disbelief and open their mind so they can hear the points I'm going to make. And it's the points I make, the attitudes that successful or healthy people have, that is the main point of the sessions. It's not just being hypnotized. It's not giving power to the unconscious mind. Those two concepts are too vague, too nebulous. To me, the point of hypnosis is to suspend disbelief so that the client can accept more wholeheartedly the points I'm making, but the points I make, the attitudes I communicate, the perspectives and beliefs that I want the client to accept and adopt, that's the main point. That is what causes change. Another mistake made by many hypnotists, and also enabled by many of their clients, is to think or to speak with toxic positivity. I would encourage my clients to think realistically. And I think that among many so-called positive thinkers, there is a false dichotomy between positive thinking and negative thinking. So the idea is, if you aren't thinking positively, you must be thinking negatively. In my opinion, I just want to shortcut that positive to negative dichotomy or spectrum and suggest that we should always seek truth. We should always think realistically. And sometimes we judge reality as good. Sometimes we judge reality as bad. But I would always encourage my clients to think realistically. And the other thing about thinking is that our attention can only go to a small number of places at any given time. So in this great, big, vast world, there is much that is true and reassuring, or true and comforting, or true and inspiring, or true and motivating, that we don't have to make up anything that is overly positive or overly optimistic. We can simply look at the better parts of the world itself. And to me, this is more sustainable change. I want reality validating the worldview that I communicate to my clients. So-called toxic positivity, or even just, regular positive thinking, very often creates a worldview that is divorced from what's validated by ongoing reality. Just like a very negative thinking, very pessimistic thinking is also invalidated by ongoing reality. I want my clients to be thinking in ways that are constantly validated on an ongoing basis by reality. So, for example, every time you leave your home, the only fair prediction is at the end of your day, you're going to return back home and sleep in your bed. That's going to happen. If someone's afraid of flying, then the only fair prediction to make is that the plane will land safely at the destination airport and their vacation will continue. It's not positive thinking to believe that the plane will land safely at the end. That is simply the only realistic, fair, likely prediction to make. So that's why I promote realistic thinking under the idea that there's so much in the world that's true and reassuring, that we do not have to make up a false or toxic positivity to balance or counteract one's anxious or so-called negative tendencies. One other mistake that new practitioners often make is blending their personal, spiritual, or religious beliefs with professional practice. And I know there is a tradition of spiritualism or past life regression or mysticism in hypnosis, but generally among the professions, it isn't appropriate for spirituality or religion to enter professional practice, even though in some places it's quite common. Different people have different spiritual beliefs, and most people, at least in Toronto, don't believe in reincarnation. They might be open to the idea, they might entertain it, just like they might entertain multiple gods or whatever other belief you might point out. But for many clients, they don't want to have to believe that reincarnation happens in order to quit smoking or to be happier or to be more optimistic. This ties in with my earlier point about how I would rather have the client think realistically than to have them think positively. And it also ties in with my point that just because the client feels nice in the session, it doesn't mean they're going to still feel nice or be changed weeks or months or years after the session is over. To me, change should be validated or reinforced by the outside world. And the only way to do that is to have the client see the world through clearer eyes. The last point I'm going to make is more an administrative matter than it is a matter of good hypnotherapy. It's that practitioners who don't charge enough for each session often end up in the awkward position of either facing financial ruin or unnecessarily adding extra sessions to a client's program. Here we charge enough that if the client only does one session, it's really not a huge deal. Many clients do really just want to do one session, experience hypnosis, and see how it goes. We do encourage people who are interested in long-term change to consider a holistic view of their mindset and their life. We will make our best estimate for how many sessions a client will require, but some clients only really want to do one session, and we can't force people to come back. So if a practitioner charges a fee that doesn't pay for their customer acquisition cost and their rent and other overhead costs, then again, either they're not going to stay in business for long, or they're going to somehow, one way or another, compel the client to come back for multiple sessions to make up in volume what they're not getting as an hourly or per session rate. To me, that's all backwards. One of the best parts about hypnosis is people can change relatively quickly. Sometimes people do stop smoking after one session. Sometimes people really only need a gentle nudge over one session in order to make a lasting change. And I never want to put myself in a position where I resent the client for making such rapid change. The only way to do that, and to also have this office, and to have a welcoming environment, and to have people working with me, and for me to have a relatively comfortable lifestyle, such as what my clients have as well, is to charge a hourly rate that can pay for all of this. So that's my speech about the mistakes that new practitioners often make. And if you have had bad experiences with hypnosis, you might recognize that one of the points I made matches your experience. Rest assured, if you do work with me, or if you work with someone who adheres to some of the principles I've talked about, that these will not be any kind of problem. Hypnotherapy or hypnosis is not a uniform profession. It's not like a root canal with one dentist is basically the same as a root canal with their competitor across the street. Hypnotherapy is more of an art than a science, and the sessions you get from different practitioners can be quite different. So if you have had a bad experience with hypnosis, don't be dissuaded. Probably the practitioner just didn't screen you well enough. Probably they didn't explain things well enough. Maybe they brought in spirituality. Maybe they were overly optimistic or overly positive. Maybe they made one of these other mistakes. and all you need is a practitioner who doesn't do these things. Again, it's Luke Chow from the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis in Toronto, Canada, where we make hypnosis make sense. If you enjoyed this video, please click like down below, subscribe to our channel for more free content like this, and if you have any questions or comments, if you agree or disagree, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you.